Trump International Hotel and Tower in New York sparkled like a diamond against the stark winter backdrop. The crisp, icy air seemed to enhance the brilliance of the hotel, its radiant crystal chandeliers casting shimmering reflections on the polished marble floors. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with energy. Staff members moved swiftly and efficiently, their polished shoes clicking softly as they navigated the grand halls. The hotel, long regarded as the pinnacle of opulence and sophistication, was busier than ever as preparations were underway for a highly anticipated event. Rumors swirled among the staff about the guest list. Whispers of influential CEOs, prominent politicians, and world-renowned celebrities filled the air. Every detail, from the finest linen draped over the tables to the placement of the floral arrangements, had to be flawless. The pressure was palpable, yet each staff member carried themselves with the grace befitting the hotel's legacy. Amid the orchestrated chaos, the main doors of the hotel glided open, ushering in a gust of cold air. An older man stepped inside, his movements slow and deliberate. Snowflakes clung to the shoulders of his thick wool coat, and his hat was pulled low, casting a shadow over most of his face. He didn't carry a suitcase, nor was he flanked by an entourage, a rarity for anyone entering this establishment. He paused briefly just inside the doorway, taking in the scene before him. To the staff hurrying past, he seemed like just another visitor. Their attention was focused elsewhere, on the glittering guests they expected to arrive. Few, if any, noticed the quiet figure standing in the grand lobby. But had they taken a closer look, they might have seen something familiar in the man's demeanor. His gaze, though understated, carried a deep sense of connection. It was the look of someone who had invested not just money, but his soul into the creation of this place. This man was none other than Donald Trump, the visionary founder and proud owner of Trump International Hotel. But today, he wasn't here in his usual role as a billionaire, a businessman, or a public figure. No cameras trailed behind him. No reporters called out his name. Today, he had come as an ordinary guest, choosing to forego the pomp and circumstance that often surrounded him. Donald Trump wanted to see his creation in its truest form. He wasn't interested in a curated experience, one polished for his approval. He wanted to step into the shoes of any regular guest, to feel the atmosphere he had once dreamed of creating. Was the hotel still a place that embodied excellence and warmth, or had it become simply a symbol of luxury without heart? As he stood there, quietly observing, his eyes took in every detail: the soft glow of the chandeliers, the way the staff moved about with choreographed precision, the elegant yet welcoming decor of the lobby. A faint smile tugged at the corners of his lips. This was his pride, his legacy, and yet, a question lingered in his mind. Does this place still reflect the values I built it on? For a moment, he allowed himself to savor the energy of the bustling lobby. Then, with his usual calm composure, he began walking toward the reception desk. The click of his shoes against the marble was subtle, almost drowned out by the surrounding noise. But his movements were deliberate and confident. There was no fanfare as he approached. No one stopped to acknowledge him or call out his name. To the staff station nearby, he appeared to be just another visitor, perhaps even someone out of place in a venue of such grandeur. But for Donald Trump, that anonymity was exactly what he wanted. Today wasn't about being recognized or celebrated. It was about the simple act of walking into his creation as an unseen guest, embarking on what he thought would be an ordinary interaction. What he didn't know, however, was that this simple act would set in motion events that would ripple far beyond the quiet moment of his arrival. It would become a lesson, not just for one person, but for everyone present that day. A lesson about kindness, humility, and the true meaning of success. As he neared the reception desk, A subtle air of curiosity followed him. Unbeknownst to him, this ordinary moment was about to take a turn that neither he nor anyone in the lobby would soon forget. Sarah was a young woman with a story not unlike those of countless others who had grown up on the outskirts of New York. Her family had struggled for as long as she could remember, scraping by with little more than the basics. As a child, Sarah would often stare out of her bedroom window at night, her imagination wandering to a life filled with the elegance and luxury she saw on TV. She told herself that one day, she would escape her humble beginnings. She wouldn't just survive, she would thrive. And when she landed a position at the front desk of the prestigious Trump International Hotel, she felt as though she had finally arrived. To Sarah, this job was more than a paycheck. It was her declaration to the world. She had made it. Her pride in her role was unmistakable. Every day, she stood at the gleaming marble counter, her posture perfect, her uniform spotless. To her, the front desk was not just a place to check in guests, it was a stage. And Sarah played her part with the confidence of someone who believed they belonged among the elite. But over time, her pride began to twist into something less admirable. She started to believe that the way she treated people reflected her own social standing. Guests who looked the part, those dressed in tailored suits and adorned with designer accessories, received her warmest smiles and most gracious service. But those who didn't fit her image of affluence often encountered a colder, more dismissive side of her. It was an unusually busy evening when Donald Trump walked into the lobby. Sarah had just finished assisting a returning guest, a man in his 40s, dressed in a bespoke navy suit and wearing a watch that glinted under the chandelier's light. "Welcome back, sir," she said with a smile that radiated warmth and professionalism. "It's always an honor to serve you at our hotel." She made a point of leaning slightly forward, a gesture of respect and attentiveness she had perfected. As the man nodded appreciatively and walked away, Sarah called over a server and requested a complimentary glass of wine to be delivered to the guest room. She firmly believed that such thoughtful gestures toward affluent patrons would elevate her standing and perhaps even fast-track her career. As the man disappeared into the elevator, Sarah's eyes returned to the counter, where a new guest now stood. The contrast between this man and her previous guest was stark. He was older, wrapped in a thick, slightly worn coat. Snowflakes clung to his shoulders, melting into damp spots as the warmth of the lobby enveloped him. His hat was pulled low, casting a shadow over much of his face. But Sarah could see enough to note his tired expression. The man carried no luggage, an immediate red flag in Sarah's eyes. Leaning slightly forward, she forced a faint smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her tone, stretched with impatience, lacked the warmth she had offered just moments earlier. "Good evening. How can I help you?" The man returned her greeting with a genuine smile, his voice calm and friendly. "Good evening. I'd like to book a room, please. Any room will do as long as I can rest." Sarah hesitated, her professional mask slipping for a moment. She raised an eyebrow, her lips pressing into a thin line. After a beat, she responded, her voice polite but laced with a subtle hint of mockery. "Sir, if you're looking for an affordable room, I could recommend some other hotels nearby. One's more suitable for?" She let her sentence trail off, her gaze deliberately dropping to his modest coat before returning to his face. Her smile sharpened, carrying the faintest edge of condescension. "Your situation." The man's smile didn't waver, but something shifted in his eyes. What had been a warm and open expression now carried an intensity that was hard to ignore. His gaze seemed to cut through her, as if he could see every thought running through her mind. "Thank you," he said, his tone steady, almost gentle. "But I think this hotel will be fine for me. I can pay right away." There was no hint of anger in his voice, just an unshakable firmness. Sarah's confidence faltered, though she tried to mask it with a nervous laugh. She straightened her posture and attempted to regain control of the conversation. "This is a five-star hotel, sir," she said, her voice tightening slightly. "The lowest priced room here starts at $1,000 a night. I don't think." Her words trailed off as she hesitated, caught between trying to be polite and wanting to reject him outright. But her expression betrayed her skepticism. The man remained silent, standing perfectly still. He let the moment stretch, his eyes studying her carefully. To Sarah, the silence felt oppressive, as if he were weighing something far greater than her ability to check him into a room. For a fleeting second, the man's gaze softened, and a shadow of something deeper passed over his face. Memories of his younger years, moments when he, too, had been judged for not fitting a certain mold, flickered in his mind. But the moment passed, and his expression returned to one of calm authority. "I don't think my ability to pay is an issue here. Do you?" he said, his tone firm but not unkind. "I just need a place to rest. But thank you for your concern." Sarah's composure cracked further. Something about his tone and the way he looked at her made her uneasy, though she couldn't quite pinpoint why. Still, she clung to her professional facade, unwilling to back down completely. Shrugging lightly, she glanced at him once more before shaking her head. "I'm afraid we don't have a suitable room for you, sir," she said, her voice losing some of its earlier sharpness. "But I'm sure there are plenty of other options nearby that you could consider." The man said nothing more. He regarded her for a moment longer, his gaze steady and thoughtful, before nodding slightly. "I see," he said simply. "Thank you." He turned and began to walk away, his steps measured and deliberate. But in that quiet moment, neither Sarah nor anyone else in the room could have guessed that this seemingly ordinary interaction was about to become a turning point, not just for her, but for everyone who would soon witness what was to come. Martinez, a seasoned manager at Trump International Hotel, moved purposefully through the grand lobby, his eyes darting from one corner of the space to another. Every detail of the hotel's preparation for the evening's event fell under his watchful gaze. For Martinez, this wasn't just a job, it was a calling. The hotel wasn't simply a place of employment, it was a second home, a source of pride, and a legacy he had poured himself into for over 20 years. To him, Trump International Hotel wasn't just about marble floors, sparkling chandeliers, or the prestigious name it carried. It was about the people, the staff who worked tirelessly and the guests who came seeking the kind of experience that only this hotel could offer. Martinez had devoted decades of his life to upholding that legacy, and in his heart, he owed it all to the man who had given him the opportunity to be part of it, Donald Trump. As Martinez scanned the lobby, his eyes swept over the reception area. A figure standing at the front desk caught his attention, a man with a calm, understated demeanor. Something about him struck a chord of familiarity, though his modest appearance didn't immediately match the image in Martinez's memory. The man stood there silently, his hands resting casually on the counter as he spoke to Sarah, one of the newer receptionists. Martinez stopped mid-step, his chest tightened, and his heart seemed to skip a beat. It was him. The memories came rushing back in an instant. The day Martinez first joined the hotel staff. He had been a nervous young employee, eager to prove himself but unsure of what the future held. On that very first day, Donald Trump had shaken his hand and spoken words that had stayed with him ever since. "Always treat this place as your home, and treat everyone here as if they are your most valued guest." Those words had become more than a piece of advice. They were the guiding principle for how Martinez had conducted himself as a manager. Every decision he made, every interaction he had with staff and guests alike, was influenced by those words. Taking a deep breath, Martinez adjusted his tie and began making his way toward the front desk. His steps quickened with each stride. The uncertainty he'd felt moments earlier now replaced by a sense of urgency. As he approached, his doubts faded. There was no mistaking it. This was Donald Trump, the man who had built the hotel from the ground up, the man who had shaped its reputation for excellence. But why was Mr. Trump standing at the front desk, dressed so modestly and without the usual fanfare? And why was Sarah, the young receptionist, treating him like any other guest, perhaps even less favorably? Martinez's mind raced as he closed the distance between them. When he reached the desk, he didn't hesitate. Bowing slightly out of respect, Martinez spoke, his voice carrying both admiration and a hint of nervousness. "Mr. Trump, it's an honor to see you again. Sir, I sincerely apologize for this inconvenience. I'll arrange a room for you right away." Sarah, who had been leaning slightly against the counter just moments earlier, straightened abruptly. The color drained from her face as she stared at the older man she had just been speaking to. Her lips parted, but for a moment, no words came out. Finally, she stammered, her voice shaky. "Wait, he's Donald Trump, the owner of this hotel?" Martinez turned to Sarah, his expression a mixture of disappointment and authority. His voice was firm, but carried an undercurrent of regret. "Yes, this is Mr. Trump, the man who built the very hotel you're working at. The one who created the place you proudly tell your friends and family about." Sarah's heart sank. It felt as though the ground beneath her had disappeared. All the confidence she had carried earlier was gone, replaced by a sinking realization that she had made a terrible mistake. She stood frozen, unable to muster a single word in response. Turning back to Trump, Martinez's voice softened, but the weight of emotion was evident. He spoke with the reverence of someone who deeply appreciated the opportunities he had been given. "Mr. Trump, thank you for creating this place and for giving me the chance to work here all these years. This hotel is more than just a building. It's a symbol of excellence. We are so proud of what we've built here, but clearly, we still have room for improvement. I deeply apologize for this shortcoming." Trump listened intently, his expression calm yet thoughtful. A kind smile crossed his face as he placed a reassuring hand on Martinez's shoulder. His voice, though gentle, carried a tone of undeniable authority. "Martinez, there's no need for you to apologize. You've always done an excellent job. You've been a part of this place since the beginning, and you've helped make it what it is today." He paused, his gaze shifting briefly to Sarah, who stood silently, her head slightly bowed. Returning his attention to Martinez, Trump continued, "But let's not forget, this place wasn't built just for its luxury or reputation. It was built to embody kindness and hospitality. That's what I want to see in every employee here, including this young woman." His words weren't harsh, nor were they meant to chastise. Instead, they carried the weight of a reminder of the values that had laid the foundation for everything the hotel represented. Martinez nodded solemnly, the message resonating deeply with him. He knew that this moment would not only be a pivotal lesson for Sarah, but also a reminder to everyone in the hotel of the principles they were expected to uphold. As the conversation unfolded, the bustling energy of the lobby seemed to fade into the background. What remained was a quiet sense of reflection, a realization that the true measure of success was not in the grandeur of the surroundings, but in the integrity and compassion with which every guest was treated. And in that moment, Martinez felt a renewed sense of purpose, as though he had just been reminded of why he had devoted 2 decades of his life to this place. Donald Trump stood quietly at the front desk, showing not a flicker of anger. His composed demeanor contrasted sharply with the tension in the air. For a few moments, he remained silent, his sharp eyes scanning Sarah. She shifted nervously under his gaze, her earlier confidence replaced by a visible unease. But Trump's expression wasn't one of judgment. Instead, his gaze carried something deeper, an understanding born of experience. Slowly, a soft yet meaningful smile spread across his face. "You know," he began, his voice calm but imbued with a gravity that made every word feel significant. "The Bible teaches us, treat others the way you want to be treated." He paused, letting the words settle before continuing. His tone remained warm, but there was an unmistakable firmness beneath it. "Do you think you've done that today?" Sarah's head dropped slightly, her eyes fixed on the polished counter in front of her. She couldn't bring herself to meet his gaze. Her mind raced, replaying every word and gesture she directed at him, and she realized just how far she'd fallen short. Trump didn't wait for her response. Instead, he continued, his voice steady but now carrying an edge that pierced through her guilt. "You judged me," he said, his tone neither harsh nor soft, but piercingly honest. "You judged me based solely on my appearance, because I wasn't wearing an expensive suit or surrounded by an entourage. But let me ask you this. What if I were just an ordinary person, someone who needed help? Have you ever considered that?" His question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Sarah felt her chest tighten. "We weren't put on this earth to judge one another," Trump said, his voice softening slightly, "but to help and respect each other. That's the real purpose of this place, of what we do here." Sarah's voice trembled as she finally found the courage to speak. Her eyes, now red with unshed tears, lifted to meet his for just a moment before dropping again. "Sir, I'm truly sorry," she said, her words barely above a whisper. "I was wrong. I should never have judged you, or anyone else, based on appearances." Trump nodded gently, his expression softening even further. But when he spoke again, his tone carried the weight of a mentor delivering a critical lesson. "Everyone makes mistakes, Sarah. What matters isn't the mistake itself, but how we correct it. You have a chance to start again." Sarah swallowed hard, bracing herself for what she thought might come next. She had no idea if she was about to lose her job or face some other consequence. Trump, however, surprised her. "I'm not going to fire you," he said, "but I am requiring you to attend a special training program. It's not a punishment, it's an opportunity. There, you'll learn how to respect and serve every guest, no matter how they look or where they come from. Because respect, Sarah, knows no boundaries of wealth or status." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried through the lobby with clarity. Several employees who had paused their work to watch the interaction now stood frozen, their gazes fixed on Trump. His words resonated not just with Sarah, but with everyone within earshot. Sarah felt the weight of her guilt pressing down on her, but something else stirred within her, a spark of hope. Bowing her head, tears spilled onto her clasped hands as she spoke. "Thank you, sir," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I realize now how wrong I was, and I promise to change. I'll work with my whole heart, just as you've taught me." Trump's smile widened slightly, his eyes shining with compassion. "I believe you can, Sarah," he said. "Sometimes, the biggest mistakes teach us the most valuable lessons." His words weren't just directed at Sarah. They were a beacon for everyone present. Employees standing nearby exchanged glances, their expressions reflecting the impact of what they had just witnessed. Trump's demeanor wasn't that of a boss reprimanding an employee, but of a leader guiding someone toward growth. As Sarah stood there, wiping her tears, she realized this moment would stay with her forever. It wasn't just a lesson about her job, it was a lesson about life, about the importance of treating everyone with kindness and compassion. Though Trump's words had been simple, they carried the power to change hearts. And for Sarah, they had already begun to do so. The grand lobby of Trump International Hotel, a space usually alive with the laughter and chatter of distinguished guests, was now still. The usual hum of activity had faded into silence as the hotel staff, from receptionists to housekeepers, gathered at the request of their employer. Donald Trump had instructed the manager to assemble everyone, and though no specific reason was given, the gravity of the moment was clear. The employees exchanged nervous glances, their faces a mixture of curiosity and unease. When Trump entered the center of the crowd, the air seemed to shift. He didn't carry a microphone or rely on any assistants to amplify his voice. Instead, he stood there with a quiet confidence, commanding attention without a single gesture. His presence alone seemed to fill the room. As he began to speak, his voice was calm and steady, but it carried a power that made every word resonate. "I want you all to remember this," he said, his gaze moving slowly across the crowd, making eye contact with as many people as possible. "The luxury of this hotel doesn't lie in its marble floors, its sparkling chandeliers, or its five-star service." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the room. The silence that followed was almost tangible, the kind of quiet that demanded attention. "It lies," he continued, his voice softer but no less commanding, "in how you treat every single person who walks through these doors." The employees stood motionless, their eyes fixed on him. Some exchanged subtle, uncertain glances as if silently questioning their own actions. Trump let the silence stretch for a few moments, the only sound in the room being the soft hum of the air conditioning. Then, with deliberate pacing, he began again, his voice carrying both warmth and urgency. "In the service industry, what matters most isn't perfection, it's kindness." His words hung in the air, and he began to walk slowly through the crowd, his eyes meeting those of his employees as he spoke. "Every guest who comes here carries their own story. Some are accomplished individuals who've reached the pinnacle of their careers. Some are people chasing a dream, hoping for a moment of respite. And some just need a place where they feel welcome, where they feel seen." He stopped for a moment, his gaze sweeping across the faces before him. There was no anger in his expression, no harshness. Instead, his eyes conveyed something deeper, understanding and hope. "And you," he said, his voice rising just enough to emphasize the importance of his words. "You are the ones who make that possible. Not the chandeliers, not the marble floors. You." He stood still now, his hands clasped in front of him, as if preparing for the most critical part of his message. When he spoke again, his tone was lower, filled with emotion. "One day," he said, "the person you look down on could be the one who changes your life. Think about that." The words landed heavily, and the room seemed to grow even quieter. "Never judge someone based solely on their appearance," Trump continued, his voice unwavering. "Remember this, kindness and humility don't just define the class of a hotel, they define the character of every person who works here. And ultimately, they define you." Trump let his words linger, giving the staff time to absorb them. He scanned the room, taking in the faces of his employees. Near the back of the crowd, a young bellhop discreetly wiped away a tear, his shoulders trembling slightly. A housekeeper standing nearby lowered her gaze, her hands wringing nervously as though reflecting on her own interactions with guests. Even Sarah, the receptionist whose earlier behavior had sparked this gathering, stood with her head bowed, her face flushed with emotion. The silence was no longer one of anxiety, but of contemplation. Trump had not raised his voice or called anyone out by name, yet his message had struck a chord in the hearts of everyone present. He paused for a moment longer, standing at the center of the room, allowing the weight of his words to fully settle. And though the lesson was far from over, the expressions on the faces of his employees said everything. They understood. And more importantly, they felt it. As the meeting concluded, Donald Trump walked back to the front desk, where Sarah was still standing. Her face was flushed with embarrassment and emotion. He looked at her, his gaze no longer stern but filled with compassion. "Sarah," he said, his voice gentle yet weighted with meaning, "you have the potential to become an outstanding employee, but that will only happen if you put your heart into your work. Remember, this hotel is not just a luxurious building, it's a shared home, and every guest who walks through these doors is part of that family, deserving to be welcomed with sincerity." Tears streamed down Sarah's cheeks as she lowered her head. Her voice trembled as she replied, "Thank you, sir. I promise to change. I won't let you down." Trump nodded slightly, a kind smile spreading across his face. "I believe in you, Sarah, and I hope today will be a valuable lesson, not just for you, but for all of us. Work with your heart, and this hotel will not only be renowned for its luxury, but also for the values it represents." Sarah watched him walk away, feeling a profound transformation stirring within her. From that moment on, she knew she would never forget the lesson she learned that day, a lesson about kindness, humility, and the importance of treating everyone with genuine respect. The story ends, but Donald Trump's message lingered in the minds of everyone present. The employees at the hotel didn't just learn how to work better. They came to understand that true class doesn't come from appearances, but from how people treat those around them. Trump International Hotel was no longer just a symbol of opulence, but a place where every guest could experience its core values: respect, compassion, and humanity. This story is not only a clear testament to Donald Trump's compassionate leadership, but also delivers a profound lesson about the core values of life. Humility and kindness are not luxuries. They are the foundation that enables us to connect with one another. In a world where appearances are often prioritized, this story serves as a reminder that true class does not come from wealth, status, or outward splendor, but from how we respect and treat others, regardless of who they are. Donald Trump demonstrated that leadership is not about wielding power to dominate, but about using compassion to inspire and create change. Through his calm demeanor, wisdom, and understanding, he turned a seemingly ordinary situation into a powerful lesson, not just for Sarah, but for everyone. Do not judge others based solely on their appearance. Kindness and humility are the keys that open the greatest doors in life. Being kind doesn't just make a better person, it creates a better world. This story leaves a resonant message: treat others the way you want to be treated. Only when we live with compassion and sincerity can we truly discover our own worth and spread that value to those around us. Trump International Hotel is not just a symbol of luxury, it stands as a living testament to its founder's philosophy. The value of a place doesn't lie in its external grandeur, but in how it makes people feel respected and cherished.